Jim Ripsua, welcome to realestate.com.khtv. I'm Tyler Labens, and today I'm joined in the studio by Mr. James Hewson. He's the Manager of Research and Consulting for CBRE Cambodia. James, Jim Ripsua, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. Yes, I'm James Hewson, the Head of Research Consulting from CBRE Cambodia, and thank you very much for having me.
Great. And James, could you just tell us a little bit about CBRE Cambodia and what you do here?
Yes, so CBRE Cambodia has been here for just over 10 years. We've had our 10-year anniversary in September of 2018. And very recently, we've grown from a team of about 40 people to 60. And we basically break down into professional services such as research consulting, valuation and asset services, and also brokerage from the retail, residential and office sectors.
Great. And CBRE recently put out a 2019 Fearless Forecast report. Could you just quickly tell us a little bit about that report?
Yes, we did an event in Rosewood in Vatanak Capital Tower on Wednesday, where about 200 people attended, and it was a forecast of the real estate market coming into 2019 and what we expect to happen before the end of the year.
Great, and what would you say is maybe one or two of the big key takeaways from that report?
I think the biggest key takeaway is the condominium sector. So the condominium sector is expected to increase by about 120% in terms of its supply from 2018. And in particular, the mid-range and the high-end segments are expected to increase by quite a substantial amount. So the high-end segment is expected to increase by 243% to about 10,000 units. And the mid-range segment is expected to account for about 40% of the whole sector. So this is a key takeaway that is very important for investors in the condominium sector and also people that are looking to rent as well, because this will affect the sales rates and the rental rates within the market.
Great, and we've heard from some experts in the condo sector about maybe there's an oversupply coming of condos, maybe in 2019 there will be some price correction. Do you think that's true? Do you think there will be a price correction, and if so, maybe when?
Yes, well, we actually thought there would be a price correction last year, and to our surprise there wasn't that much of a difference. So we do believe that this isn't really a matter of if but when, and we do believe that this will probably happen by the end of this year, if not maybe 2020. This is again definitely due to the high supply in the high-end segment and the mid-range segment. The affordable sector is increasing by what we predict about 100% this year, although because it's coming from a lower base, we don't think that this will necessarily reduce in the price per square meter or rental rate per square meter. So yes, we do think there's a correction, but it will mainly be in the higher end of the sector.
And by way of introduction, I guess, could you just explain how CBRE designates between high-end, mid-range, and affordable condos? What's the price difference? And
yes, so for the time being, the high-end sector is roughly about $3,250 per square meter. We do think that this adjustment, due to the oversupply that potentially will happen, will drop it down to more like $3,000 per square meter. But that's roughly the range that we are looking at for the high-end segment. For the mid-range, it's considerably lower to about $2,000 to $2,500 per square meter, maybe even a little bit higher depending on the location. And the affordable sector is roughly $1,450 per square meter, again, depending on the location and the type of development. This will vary.
Great, and as far as the buyers and the market for each segment of the condo, what does the typical buyer look like?
I think for the condominium sector, it's definitely an international market for the moment, as it is quite a new concept for the Cambodian market. What we do find is that different developments have different occupiers and different investors. So For example, RNF Properties is a Chinese developer, and they tend to develop condominium projects that will be tailored more towards the Chinese community, whereas, for example, a project like Letrate, which is a Japanese developer, which CBRE Cambodia is the sole agent for, will be more tailored towards the design expectations of a Japanese or Korean client. So the investors and the occupiers, it really depends on what the developer is and what the design and layout of the project is in general. So there is a big variety, but it's mainly international.
Great. And if someone's looking to buy a condo this year, what's the #1 piece of advice you'd give them?
Definitely be careful of the segment that you're investing in. So again, as we've said, there is expected to be 243% increase in the high-end sector. So if you're looking to buy in that sector, you need to consider the fact that the sales rates or the rental rates will probably adjust downward over the next year or several years. So you need to be a little bit wary about the long-term plan. Whereas for the affordable sector, there's probably more potential, particularly as the Cambodian middle class is growing and urbanization in Phnom Penh in particular is growing. So this will be something that will absorb a lot of the affordable sector.
Great. And this resource, the Fearless Forecast, it's a really great resource. Where can people find it if they want to take a look for themselves?
Yes, we have many social media platforms, in particular Facebook, so our CBRE Cambodia Facebook page, LinkedIn as well. We have a LinkedIn page that we regularly update, and definitely our website, so www.cbre.com.kh. You can find a historical output that we have, and also many of the listings of properties that we broker for as well.
Great, and switching gears a little bit right now, we're going to move to talk a little bit about office space in Cambodia, particularly office space in Phnom Penh. I wanted to ask you about office space in Phnom Penh. There's a wide range right now. We've got grade A, grade B, and grade C. Just by way of introduction, how do grade A, grade B, and grade C differ in Phnom Penh, and which one has more of a place in the market currently?
Yeah, these are definitely interesting times for the office sector. It seems to be transforming quite quickly, but at the same time, it's quite stable. So for the grade A market, there are currently 2 developments that are considered grade A, which are Vatanak Capital Tower and Exchange Square. The reason why they are considered by many as grade A developments is really down to the location and the fact that it's in what is widely considered the central business district near Wat Phnom. The building specifications, the design, the layout, and the type of tenants that would lease space in the buildings. So that is the grade A supply currently, and for the moment there isn't really that much competition in the grade A market. Where we are seeing a significant transformation is in the grade C to grade B sectors, where Phnom Penh has traditionally been a grade C dominated market, which is generally a smaller, cheaper version of the grade A market, usually in less desirable locations. We're now starting to see a shift into the grade B sector. So we've seen good success in new developments in the grade B sector, such as Keystone, which is a CBRE Cambodia sole agency development located on Norodom Boulevard, where we've seen the appreciation of the rental rate and a high occupancy rate as well, which is a demonstration of good demand. So we're expecting to see over the next year an increase in the grade B sector in particular, and that is an example of this transformation, particularly from developers from the grade C market into the grade B market.
Great. And it seems like there's a growing demand now for strata-titled office space. Could you explain a little bit about what strata-titled office space is and why a business might want to rent that or an investor might want to choose that?
Sure. So the primary difference between a strata title office ownership to centrally owned is that strata title is sold off It might be by unit, it might be by floors, by the developer to investors. So this is a lucrative idea for the developers because they manage to reclaim some of the money that they've put into developing the development very quickly, and it also reduces the risk once it's sold, as opposed to a centrally owned development such as Keystone, which is one developer and a landlord who will then lease out that space. So it's kind of similar to a condominium versus a serviced apartment, condominium being strata title, serviced apartment being centrally owned in that respect. Where this becomes a good thing for certain people that want to lease space, this could be a good thing because you might have an adjusted rental rate depending on the person that is owning your specific unit. However, there are downsides to strata title ownership in the sense that you might have multiple people who own the same development, and therefore there's issues with management, how many security teams, how do they interlink with each other. You can't really control who your neighbors are, and we've got quite a diverse mix of cultures in Phnom Penh currently investing, so this might cause some friction. So generally speaking, we think that centrally owned developments are a little bit safer, particularly for tenants. However, if you are an investor, and particularly in the Grade B sector, this is a good opportunity right now to invest.
And this year, the first strata-titled Grade A office space is set to hit the market. What does that mean for the market overall, and do you see that becoming a larger part of the market as it matures?
Yes, I think it'll be an interesting thing to see because the Grade A market has generally been relatively untested. We've had Vatanak Capital Tower, which has not had a particularly strong occupancy rate, but that's partly due to the fact that it's a very iconic and highly positioned development. Exchange Square, which is the other Grade A development, has done relatively well. It's got an occupancy rate of over 85%, we estimate at the moment. So other than that, there hasn't really been a test for the Grade A market. So the introduction of new Grade A developments will be something that will really demonstrate where the market is at in terms of demand. We believe at this point that it's the Grade B sector which is the prime area of demand by occupiers, but this will shift into Grade A probably in 2021 to 2023.
All right, and finally now we're going to talk about retail space in Phnom Penh. In CBRE's reports, you break retail space into a lot of different categories. You've got shopping malls, shopping centers, community malls, retail podiums. Just to give people a quick introduction, what defines each of those, and maybe what's an example of each of those in Phnom Penh?
Yes, so I think in Phnom Penh's market, as it's still quite a small market that is emerging, the shopping mall sector is still relatively small in terms of the amount of projects, but they do dominate the total supply in the retail sector. So a shopping mall in the case of Phnom Penh would be a large-scale shopping development which is usually run by an international operator. So in this case we have Aeon Mall and Aeon Sen Sok City, which opened in Q2 of 2018, and they're also planning their third development in the south of the city in 2023 to 2024. So this would be an example of a shopping mall. Shopping centres generally have a similar concept, but they are relatively small in scale when compared to these large international malls. So Savannah Mall, for example, is something that would be classified as a shopping centre. A retail podium generally is at the foot of a mixed-use development. So Exchange Square and Vatanak Capital have this retail section at the bottom of their developments, and also a project such as the Bridge, which has had a little bit of an issue leasing its space for the retail component. This would also be considered as a retail podium. And finally, community malls generally are between 5,000 and 15,000 square meters of net leasable area. and they have a little bit more of a destination sense about them. So an example might be TK Avenue or Eden Garden Mall, which has a lot of F&B, supermarkets and open space for people to relax and make more of a day of it rather than just go shopping and leave. Yeah.
And you see a lot of developers in Phnom Penh moving towards mixed-use models where they'll have retail, commercial space mixed with residential space, maybe even mixed with office space. What do you think about that? Is that a wise choice to start moving towards the mixed model?
I think definitely it depends on the location. So in an area in the central business district, there is an abundance of every type of real estate sector. So you've got your offices, you've got retail, you've got F&B outlets, all in a very close proximity to each other. If you go into more suburban areas such as Choi Chang Va, for example, there is less of the supply of any of these types of real estate. So having a mixed-use project in an area like Choi Chang Va, for example, or ING City in the south, where there is less of this supply, is a good idea because office workers need a place to eat their lunch. Also, people in service departments or condominiums need places to eat or places for entertainment. And so having this mixed-use development seems to accommodate all those needs into one area at least. Yeah.
Great. And just a final closing question. Cambodia is a fairly new market, like you said. It's a fairly young, growing market. Across Asia, there seems to be sort of a slump going on in the real estate market across the region. How do you think Cambodia will fit into that as the year goes by? And how do you think 2019 will be as a year for real estate?
I think it's very difficult for us to forecast how the year will go as there are so many moving parts. What I will say is that based on the general election that occurred last year, there showed to be some resilience in the investment into construction and the approved projects that we've been monitoring. So that is a sign that the real estate market is relatively robust at this point. Whilst there is potential for a little bit of overexposure to certain international investors, particularly in the Chinese markets, and therefore things like the US-China trade war, the EBA situation for trade, issues like this that are external might affect the performance of the real estate market in general. However, I think that there are definitely cues for areas that are going to do well. For example, land values are appreciating year on year, and whilst they're appreciating at a very rapid rate, they're considerably less than that of the neighbors to Cambodia. So an example might be Ho Chi Minh City's central business district rate per square meter for land is around $30,000, as opposed to the highest that we've seen in Phnom Penh is around $8,000. So there is this appreciation of land and a huge amount of construction, as you can see, that we think is a good sign for 2019. Great.
And as far as foreign investment coming in, obviously you mentioned it has Cambodia has the advantage of being a lot more affordable than its neighbors, Vietnam and Thailand. Do you think foreign investment will continue to ramp up as it has in past years?
Yeah, I think that again, I think there needs to be a little bit more diversification in what they are investing in. I think that generally the go-to has been the condominium sector, particularly for international investment, which I think will have to change in years to come just due to the fact of the supply-demand balance being a little bit disproportionate at this point. However, I think that there is definitely opportunity for office, and if you're a retailer in a neighboring market looking to expand into Cambodia, there are definitely plenty of retail developments for people to invest in. So that I think is a very good opportunity for international investment. And furthermore, landed property, which is an area that the local Cambodian residents prefer over condominium, for example, is also a relatively safe bet just due to the fact of urbanization rapidly increasing and the fact that there's low land values in the suburban areas.
James, just want to thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much.
And if people want to check out more about CBRE and their reports, they can go to your website, your Facebook page, or your LinkedIn page. Thank you so much for watching realestate.com.khtv.